Hey everybody! Thank you for joining me today. So today's video we're going to be using this My Favorite Thing sketch, and I want to say I got it from Pinterest, and Christy Marcotte is probably the one who figured out the measurements on it. Um, I do have a Pinterest link in the description down below, and you can go to my boards to find this particular sketch. And then over in the top left, I'm using this color scheme. This was part of a weekend challenge, and I was just showing you there the new Paint the Flower from Altenew. I decided to join their subscription plan because I love coloring flowers. It's one of my favorite things and most relaxing things to do. And I wanted to share my idea of using the colors and this sketch and combining it into one. So I decided to use Abandoned Coral, and I was going to use Twisted Citron, but I decided to use Mowed Lawn instead. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can squeeze the lid on your Tim Holtz Distress Oxides. I think it even works with the regular Distress inks. And you get a little bit of ink on the lid. And then you take your water brush and you can dap in that ink and then apply it to your image that you've got stamped. Now, I will tell you this because I figured it out later, but for the green, because there's not a whole lot of it, this is a great thing. If you have a larger area that you're trying to cover, you're going to want to use another trick that I show you, which will be coming up. So I'm just going to continue coloring in the leaves. And the best part is by doing it this way, you don't have to use a whole lot of water, okay? Which will allow for the paper you're using not to warp, because this isn't watercolor paper. This is actually Neenah 110 weight. And thankfully, I didn't have to get my brush super wet in order to spread this color. But I will tell you that it does, like, obviously it's going to make the paper damp. So it may be soft in areas. So you'll just want to be careful. Kind of let it dry if you can. And then if you want to get darker areas or more shading, then you just grab more of the color. And like on this top one, I'm going to color it in a little bit darker. And the underneath part, I'm going to keep lighter. Now, normally you would do it the opposite way, right? Because you're figuring the under part probably has a shadow. And then the top part has the light on it. But I like doing it that way. To me, it's whatever moves your fancy. Now here, I'm just trying to get the green off of my brush so that way I know it's clean and ready to go on to the next color. Now I'm doing the same thing with this one, and I squeezed inside the container itself. And I'm going to start putting down some of my color. And this works probably about, I would say maybe halfway through. Either halfway, I definitely more than quarter of the way through. And that's when I get the bright idea, like, you know what, I should just do something else. And actually, yeah, it was a quarter. I decided to grab a block, one of my clear blocks, and just dab the ink pad right on the corner. And what this does, it gives you more ink, especially for such a larger section of flowers and all this filling in. It just allows me to be able to grab color darker in some area, grab a little bit lighter, just to have different variations, different grades, and it goes way faster. Let me just tell you, way faster. So if you have a larger area, grab your block, squish it on your glass mat. I could have done that too. My only problem is that I was close in so that you guys could see, what I was coloring and stuff. And I didn't want to wind up putting my project into it. So that's why I decided to smush it on the block. It just makes it easier to have a central place that I can grab from and no risk of me putting my hand in it. And see, we're way closer to being done. I would have had to have squeezed probably like 3 or 4 times by now into the lid to have gotten as far as I did. So I'm just going to keep on the top flower as well. And what I decided to do, like I did the abandoned coral because obviously of that coral color that's in there on the color channel challenge on the top left side. And then I also did I did a test one using more of that purple with the greens. And I really liked how that came out. And if you wanted to, you could do one where it's a mixture of those 4 colors in the flowers, like a little bit of yellow in the center and then going out to the abandoned coral. You can do that with the purple going in the center and then going out to the light yellow. There's so many different ways that you could do it, and these colors work really well together. I really like how they are in this photo, and it can be very inspiring. And I actually have a board on my Pinterest page for, I call it color schemes, because eventually, if everybody, likes the idea with the color challenge, someday I would like to have a separate series where I can grab, a bunch of those or grab from those and get inspiration and share my coloring and stuff like that with you. So that's always a possibility too. So while that's off to the side drying, I cut these strips. I think on the sketch itself, it is saying that it's, I want to say, a 1/2 inch wide. And I did my first one a 1/2 inch wide on my strips. And though I do like how it turned out, I wanted to try it with a 1/4 inch because sometimes I'm torn between that. If it's on the sketch and they say 1/2 inch, sometimes I'm thinking it should be a little bit smaller. So this is my other option if you don't like a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to use my grid mat, and I'm going 1/2 inch down from the top, and I'm going to put my 1/4 inch strip, and then I'm going to grab the next one, line it back up. I'm going to put some tape down on this one, and then a little bit of the art glitter glue, because that gives me time to wiggle to wiggle and move, so that way I can get it placed exactly where I want. And once that's lined up, I'm going to go down a 1/4 inch and try and line it up. And the best part is, if I do put it in the wrong spot or it's slightly off and I move it around, the glue dries clear. So even if a little bit gets on the actual craft cardstock, it'll be all right. And I got my focal image that's going to go right in the middle, just like that. Now for these 2 pieces, these are actually the ends of the first 2 when I trimmed them down, because they're like 6 inches long, and I trimmed it down to 4 inches. And not 4 inches, I think it's actually 3. I can't see it, but anywho, the the striped, or the piece that the stripes are going on top of, once I trimmed it down to the right size, I had these extra pieces, and I was like, well, instead of cutting a whole nother strip, I can just take these 2 leftover pieces and trim one side down, and I would have what will look like a full piece when I put my focal image on top, because you're not going to see the fact that it doesn't connect. Little trick for you guys. So if you have scraps or you're trying to create stripes and you're like, it's not going to fit lengthwise, I'm a big fan. Cut it in half, stretch it to where you need it, and then put your focal image right on top to make sure you cover the hole in the center and no one is the wiser. So now for the focal image, I want to get in a little piece of hair underneath there. I mean, no one would see it, but I was just like, that's just really weird and random. So I lifted it up and got it out. And now we're going to put down the rest of the tape. I'm going to cut a piece from my roll and go ahead and lay these out. I'm going to lay down 2 more stripes, and it actually works out to where I don't have any extra. I just readjust this one up a little bit more and it fits perfect. All right. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to touch up my edges here, make sure it's all nice and smooth. I'm going to put this on so that way my glue doesn't dry out. All right, and we're gonna stamp our sentiment and heat emboss so that way that part is done before I put it all together. Now on this one, I'm gonna use my Versaclear Nocturnal ink, and we're just gonna use our powder and then brush it off with my Nuvo brush. And then stamp down, trying not to press really hard, but just allowing it to have a moment to like kind of seep into the cardstock. And then now I'm going to grab, behind me I have on some shelves a couple of my go-to embossing powders, and clear is definitely one that I always try and keep around, because whenever you're using Versaclear, Versamark, I'm trying to think of VersaFine, you know, those inks stay wet longer, and if you use your clear embossing powder, whatever color you use will shine through. So I pretty much always have to keep it on hand. And, you know, for anybody who is fearful of smudging, this is a great trick, okay? Stamp with your hybrid ink, use some clear embossing, and you don't have to worry about smudges anymore. All right, so we're going to take the backing off. Now, if you guys notice, we haven't used any pattern paper. We have a plain cardstock, and our focal image is really the star of the show. Now, when I put that there, I realized, you know what, it's kind of close to my sentiment. And the good news is I didn't press down. So I was able to pick it back up, move my sentiment up just a little bit, and that gave it a little bit of space on the bottom, so that way the wording had room to breathe. And then after we put down the tape and I'm going to glue it up, I'm going to realize I haven't folded over my card. I scored my card base, but I hadn't folded it and creased it yet. So I'm going to have to put this down, grab my cardstock and fold it over. And then using my Teflon bone folder, I'm just going to press it down. And it was off just slightly, so I just try to hold it as close as possible and then press down again. And then once I had it in the right spot, I'm going to line it up, making sure that's about 1/4 of an inch on each side. And with this piece here, you could have even put fun foam behind it, some foam tape behind it, whatever you want, give it some dimension too, and that would be perfectly fine. I just always say, you know, just be careful depending on if you have to mail it or hand it out. And then for a last little bit of something, I grabbed my Spectrum Noir Sparkle. Yeah, I think it's a sparkle brush. It's the clear. And we're just going to go over both of the flower clusters. And then just be careful, because with oxides, with anything like that, watercolor, you know, when you use your glitter markers, they do reactivate. So you just want to hit your area and then make sure to rub it off on a, you know, scrap piece of paper. Make sure no more colors on it, and then that way you're ready to go for your next project. And it just gives you a little bit of sparkle. All right, so there's the abandoned coral, and then on that one I used seedless preserves, which is really pretty. Yeah, seedless preserves. Alrighty, so all my links are going to be down below, and here are some close-ups. You can see some of the shimmer. Taking the photo is very interesting when it comes to stuff sparkly. It doesn't really like it that much, but you can see you get a lot of sparkle out of those particular markers. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and share button, and then definitely leave a comment down below. I love reading them, and I try to answer everybody. It just really excites me when, you know, people leave a comment and we talk about the different techniques or whatever you see that you guys didn't know. It's just really exciting. So I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you with our next video.